boys and girls. So good to have you here with me today. We are going to be talking about a very important person, and you maybe know of him just because you don't have school on Monday because of a holiday that is taken in our country to honor this really amazing gentleman. So you don't have school on Monday. Anybody know why? Martin Luther King Day. Right. So who was Martin Luther King? Let's talk about that. Well, first of all, maybe you've heard of a guy named Martin Luther. In October, we talked about him. Martin Luther lived in the 1500s in Germany, and he was a really important person in the life of our church, of all of our churches. And so the gentleman we're talking about today was named after him, Martin Luther. King was his last name, and then Junior, because that was his dad's name also. And so this person, let me show you, get a picture so you can kind of get a visual of who this was. So maybe you've learned about him before in class, but I think it's really important that we really talk about him today a little bit. So Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia, which is down in the South, right? In Georgia. And he was super smart. And he went to college when he was 15. So he started college really early. And again, I know, maybe of some people that do that now, but back then that was pretty rare. And so then he went to college and he went to seminary. So he became a minister, just like me, like a pastor, right? So you call him Reverend. But he also kept going and got more education, and so then he got his doctorate. So you call him Doctor. So it's really Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can you imagine having to write that on your papers every day? That would be a lot, right? But anyway, so he was a person who was very involved in social justice. So social justice are things that are always important. And he was especially interested in the rights for African Americans. So I have something kind of sad to tell you, and maybe you know this already, but did you know that in the 30s, 40s, 50s, well, you know about slavery, right? So you know that there were people that were taken from Africa and other countries, people of dark skin, and that they were brought to the United States, and they were kept as property. They were made to be slaves, and I'm sure you've probably read about that in class. So it was a really kind of a very dark part of our American history. So there's some wonderful things about America, but slavery was not one of those, was it? Because they were treated other people as property. So like if you say, hey, that's my bike, that's mine. Well, people would say that about other people. Oh, that's my kitchen slave, and I can tell them to do whatever I want, and I can, if they try to run away, I can hunt them down and I can have them killed. So it was really a really bad time in our history. After that, we know the Civil War, right, came, right? And after that, you've heard of Abraham Lincoln, right? Slavery was no longer legal, but people down especially in the South, the southern United States, were not treated well at all. And so there still was what's called segregation, so there would be people that would, white people, let's say in a bus. When you ride your school bus, you're all sitting together, right? Like all the kids are just, you get on the bus, you sit wherever you want to sit, right? Well, back down in the South, during these times, if you can believe this, I mean, it's kind of hard to even wrap our head around, but when you would get on the bus, if you were a white person, you got to sit in the front of the bus. And if you were a black person, you had separate seats that you had to sit in the back of the bus. Can you imagine that? Today, if somebody gets in and then someone would say, oh, you have red hair, you've got to sit over in this part of the bus. Or, oh, you're a baseball player? Oh, well, you can't sit with the football players. You've got to sit over here separately, right? So it was really a sad time, right? Because they couldn't sit wherever they wanted to sit. And people judged them just because of their skin color. And so some of the African American leaders and some of the white leaders and from other parts of the country said this is not right. And so they started doing some peaceful protests. And in fact, Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the first people who protested. Well, maybe you've heard Rosa Parks, that she had worked all day, was really super tired, got on the bus, and she was sitting in a spot that was designated for a white person to sit. So somebody with my skin color, as opposed to a darker skin color like Dr. King. And so they made her leave, told her, you need to get out of your seat. And she's like, I've worked all day. I'm so tired. I was here first. I'm not, I'm just sitting. And she refused to leave. And so, again, she wasn't being mean. No, she wasn't shouting at anybody or hurting anybody. She just said, this is not right. People should be able to sit anywhere they want to sit on the bus and not have it just determined because of their skin color. And so Martin Luther King Jr., this was one of his first times. Then after that, it was called the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And so he made sure that they were peaceful, and they would carry signs, and they would say, this is not right. And so that was one of the big things that Dr. King really helped people with, is to learn about peaceful protest, nonviolent protest. And again, maybe you've heard about some other protests that have been violent recently in our capital. But Dr. King never, ever would be a part of anything like that. But he said also, though, that if we just sit still and don't do anything, that we're kind of guilty of not helping people who need to have what's called social justice, or to have justice to prevail. We see time and again in the Bible that Jesus was always working for people of all skin colors and all races, and always wanting for people to just get along and to not care about all those different things. But what skin color are you? Or what religion are you? Or different things like that. It's like if you would say, oh, I'm only going to be friends with you because you love math like I do, and somebody else, oh, they love English. Well, I don't really like English, so I can't be your friend. Well, what's that have to do with it, right? That's what we talked about last week, remember, in our kids moment, about how that God created us differently on purpose, that we can celebrate our diversity. So that's really a wonderful thing. So Dr. King, all his life, kept trying to make a difference. And he went to Washington, D.C., and he had a very, very famous speech in 1963. And that was the year before I was born. So this was a long time ago, right? But he helped to organize, and he gave a very, very famous speech that maybe sometime you can read this speech if you'd like. You can pull it up online and find it. But it was called, I Have a Dream. And he just talked about all the things that he dreamt about. And I think personally that when he gave that speech, that God inspired those words, because I think the words that he shared are things that God also dreams of for us. I have a dream that all people will be created, or that all created people will be treated with respect, that all people will have opportunity, that it won't be that someone goes in to interview for a new job and someone says, oh, well, wait a minute, have this skin color and you have this skin color. And usually it's you're white and you're black. And so, well, I don't really know too many black people, so I'm not going to even hire that person. Judging people because maybe that person is really, really wonderful. But that happens all the time sometimes, right? They'll say, oh, well, you're a man and you're a woman. I really think a man could do a better job at this. Or a woman could do a better job at something else. And that's really not fair, right? Because each and every one of us is created with different traits. And so there are some women that are really, really good in construction and can drive a big truck and are really strong, and they can do different things in building things, for example. And then we have some men that are really good with children, or really good with creating things, making art or baking or doing different things like that. So that's, to me, the beautiful part of the way God made us, is that we each have different, they're called gifts or spiritual gifts. Maybe you're really good at listening to your friends when they have problems, or maybe you're really good at art, creating things to kind of help people to feel better. So what are your strengths? Can you name them out loud right now? What are some things that you're really good at, that God gave you talents to do? Yeah, and I wish I could really, know exactly what you were saying, but maybe you can send me a quick text or an email sharing those. But I already know some of the things, since I know all of you pretty well, that I already know some things that you're all good at. And many of you have lots of gifts, don't you? So that's a real blessing. Well, Dr. King had some really good gifts, and one of his was, can you see what he's doing there? See all these? These are kind of old-fashioned microphones. So he was giving a speech. So a person who gives speeches is called an orator. And so he was a really, really gifted orator. And again, there are a few recordings of him that you can find on YouTube, and you can check those out. But he was a very good orator. He was very eloquent when he spoke, and when he was very convincing. He was passionate about what he believed in. And so he really was able to make a big difference in helping people understand what the African American people were going through at that time. Did you know they had separate water fountains and separate bathrooms? Yeah. So when you would go to get a drink of water, if you were African American, you couldn't just use the closest drinking fountain. You had to go find the drinking fountain for the African Americans, or blacks as different called. We are called whites, right, or Caucasians, right? So it's just two different groups of people, but we're all people, right? Yeah, absolutely. So can you imagine that if you'd go to use the water fountain and somebody would say, nope, you have brown hair. Nope, no brown-haired people can use this water fountain. You've got to go over there and use that other one way down the hall, right? So that's called discrimination, when people are not allowed to share things and use the same things that other people are allowed to use. And so that's why it was so important that Dr. King would kind of make everybody in the country aware of this. And again, if he didn't use force, he didn't hit people to get them to listen to him. He used his words, and he used showing love to other people. And he used, hey, let's all get together and let's say, hey, we are going to sit here together and we're not going to move. We are just going to go like a sit down strike. So there were all different ways that they would show peacefully, to show, though, that things were not right, that we need to make positive change. Dr. King did his famous I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. So again, you know who Abraham Lincoln is, right? And Abraham Lincoln has a beautiful memorial in Washington, D.C. And hopefully, if you've never been to D.C., once COVID is over, I think that would be a great trip. Maybe wait several months until things settle down in DC, obviously. But boy, that would be a really great trip if you've never been there. Or pull it up online, and you can look up different parts of where the White House is and the Capitol building, and just the beautiful history that is there. And so Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. You have to walk up all these steps. And if you've ever seen a movie like Night at the Museum, 2, I think it was the second one. There's Abraham Lincoln sitting in a chair, and then there's all these pillars, and then there's all these steps that go down from that. And so Dr. King stood on those steps. And I wish I'll try to maybe put it in a picture in part of this video, but you can actually stand on the same exact step of where Dr. King stood. So we went to Washington, D.C. about maybe 5 years ago on vacation. And we found the spot, and there's a little marker that says, on this spot, Dr. King gave his famous speech. And so you can stand on the spot and look down over all the beautiful lawn, and it's a Washington Monument you can see. And it's really amazing to just see, again, the wonderful things that our government has done of having freedoms and freedom of speech and freedom to worship. Some countries don't have that. that they would tell you either you can't worship or you have to worship this one way. But in our country, we don't have that. So we can worship how we want to. So there's so many wonderful things, but we have to be realistic. There's also some not wonderful things about our country, about our history, and about things that have been happening recently too. So it's such a joy to be able to look at history and learn from it, and to be able to go, oh, this is hard, but you know what? We can learn from this and we can become better people. And part of that is from somebody like Martin Luther King Jr., that stood up for what was right. And in fact, it's a very sad ending, I'm sorry to say, for his life, that he was assassinated. So somebody killed him because of his views, because that he was always, very much in the public eye and always with media and cameras and always up there making speeches and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, somebody actually killed him. But the good thing is that his legacy lives on. That's why you don't have school on Monday. So maybe you take it as a day that you get to sleep in and have fun, and I hope that's great. I hope you enjoy that. But I also hope, though, that you think about and you take a little bit of time today or Monday and look up and see if you can find some more information on Martin Luther King Jr. I would love for you to do that and watch a short YouTube video. Because, again, there are so many things we can learn from him. We can learn that all people are equal, and we can learn not just from him, but Jesus, right? That Jesus told us that, and God says that, right? All over the place in the Bible, that all people are equal and that all people are loved by God. Every single person, whether or not, whatever your skin color is, however you're different from your friends, God loves you just as you are. And that's just such a blessing, isn't it? So I hope that you remember that to treat all people with respect, that all people are loved by God. And I hope that you enjoy your day on Monday as well. So can you pray with me? Can you repeat after me, please? Dear God, thank you for people like Jesus and others like Dr. King, who help us to learn how to love and show respect for all people. Amen. Well, it was great to see you. Hope you have a wonderful, fun holiday on Monday. Take care.